Joe Rogan is about to ask JD Vance the most important question we should all be asking.
Even though when she came into office, they bragged about undoing all of Donald Trump's successful border policies. They did exactly that. And then we had the massive migrant invasion that we've seen over the last 3 years.
And I think it was good on you in the debate with Tim Walz when they fact-checked you. They tried to fact-check you and say that this has always been in place. And you stepped up and said, no. This app is new, and this app was specifically used for shipping.
Yes.
And now they're using it to schedule people to illegally come into the country. Here's the question.
Sure.
Why? Why is this happening? What do you think? I mean, obviously speculation a little bit, but what do you think the motivation of allowing this to take place and the disproportionate number of people that have moved to swing states, which is also like a little suspicious?
So it depends on how many tinfoil hats do you have in this room?
I got a lot, dude. I got a wardrobe.
We can get real serious about this real quick, or pretty crazy very quickly. Look, I think what is obvious is, and I've seen this in the halls of Congress, I've seen it very explicitly. You talk about lobbying, and we obviously talked about in the context of other industries. There is a massive corporate lobby for cheap labor in the United States of America. And that is, I think, the main thing that's going on. Think about this. If you've got millions of illegal aliens, okay, let me tell you a story. In 2017, 2018, when I was in the private sector, I was at a business conference dinner, and I was seated next to the CEO of one of the largest hotel chains in America. This is, I think, probably 2018. And the guy is going on and on about how much he hates Donald Trump. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, why do you hate Donald Trump so much? Because, again, I was sort of a Trump skeptic in 2015, and at this point, I was kind of, starting to really get on the Trump train. And he said, well, the reason I hate Donald Trump, he says, is because Donald Trump's border policies have cut down the number of illegal immigrants. And because I can't pay illegal immigrants under the table anymore, I have to pay American workers, and they want much higher wages.
Do you think it's scary that CEOs are now getting to the point where they can so comfortably admit to ethically horrific practices?
And I was like, this guy just admitted it. I was like, holy shit, this guy just admitted it.
Now, a crime.
That is like straight up monopoly, man, evil shit that this guy admitted to. And I was like, my wife, who's very apolitical, she was actually at the dinner with me, and she's like, come again? You just said you don't want Americans to get decent wages. Like, that is the best argument for Donald Trump's immigration policy, is that American workers are getting higher wages, and this is why this corporate CEO hates it. So whatever the industry is, you've got a lot of people who want cheap labor, and they don't want to pay American workers higher wages. That's a big part of it. I do think there's also a power dynamic to it. In particular, I think Kamala Harris and the Democrats, they want to give these millions upon millions of illegal aliens the right to vote. They want to legalize them. They want to make it easier for them to participate in our elections. And that means fundamentally the end of American democracy. Because you're talking about 25 million people here. If Kamala Harris gives 10 million of those people legal status and allows them to vote in American elections, then say 70-30 they go Democrat, Republicans will never win a national election in this country in my lifetime.
And the only way to get them on your side would be the Republicans offer the same services and maybe even be more generous in letting illegals in.
Exactly.
I mean, you would have to literally beat them at their own game. I'm going to give you a free house.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would, lifetime's probably overstating it, but it would take 30 years for the Republicans to get to a point where we could even compete with these newcomers. But again, it will have degraded the voting power of the people who have the legal right to be here.
And it would essentially turn these states blue forever. The same way they've done California.
Exactly. And we saw this. And look, I'm like a Reagan guy, right? I'm a conservative Republican. But Reagan screwed up a lot. He screwed up mental health in this country. People don't talk nearly enough about that.
The amnesty thing he really screwed up.
The amnesty thing he really screwed up.
Yeah.
And people always say, well, Ronald Reagan, when critics of Donald Trump will say, well, look at how Reagan talked about immigration. Because of what Ronald Reagan did at the 1986 amnesty, California is now effectively a permanently blue state.
Except when Arnold won.
But Arnold ran as a super moderate Republican. He was a major celebrity, right? He was at the height of his celebrity power, and he still won barely, even though California had been mismanaged. California is a one-party state. because of Ronald Reagan's amnesty.
And that's the fear, is that the entire country could become one
party. The
party.
entire country becomes that. Now, it also, you may not appreciate this, but even if you don't give people the right to vote, it really distorts congressional apportionment and then the Electoral College. You know how this works?
Yes,
okay.
I do. But explain it to people, please.
Okay. So how many, we have 435 congressional seats. The way that you draw those congressional districts is that you try to draw them evenly based on population so that everybody has equal representation, right? One person, one vote, fundamental principle of American law. But you don't just count the American citizens. You also count the illegal aliens. And so, for example, the state of Ohio lost a congressional seat in the last census, and states that have high illegal immigrant populations picked up congressional seats. So you're actually taking away congressional representation from American citizens and giving it to illegal aliens. Even if you don't give them the right to vote, you're still destroying the voting power of American citizens.
Because it's based on population.
Because it's based on population, including illegal immigrants.
Is there a way to change it so that it's only based on legal American citizens?
Well, Donald Trump tried a proposal that Democrats went nuts over and was litigated in the courts, so we would have to try again, that would ask citizenship status during the U.S. Census. The idea being that if you ask more people their citizenship status, you get fewer people who are answering that question. I think that we should make it, and I do think this would require an act of Congress, but I think that it would be constitutional, is we should just say that illegal aliens are not counted for purposes of congressional representation.
Yeah. I mean,
Democrats would call that racist, but it's just common sense policy.
Well, especially if it's been shown that you're manipulating it by moving more people to these places, and even if they're not legal citizens and they can't vote, it still counts as congressional seats.
Correct.
That's kind of crazy.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't. The one that drives me the most crazy is this idea that somehow or another it's discriminatory to require ID to vote.
It's nuts.
That could only mean. I've tried to look at this from the most charitable position outside of it. Only makes sense if you're trying to cheat.
That's exactly right.
You need an ID for everything.
Yeah.
You need an ID to rent a car.
Well, it's basically illegal now in California to ask for voter ID.
Which is crazy.
Which is totally insane. But, my view, and I'm sure you got many, many listeners in the great state of California, the next time you're pulled over by a police officer, just tell them that you're on your way to vote.
I've seen that meme.
I mean, think about this.
Yeah.
If you can't require people to show voter ID, then I think you're inviting fraud into your system. And there's also something implicitly very racist about this, because what they say is voter ID means that black people aren't going to vote. Well, number one, if you look at polls, the same level of support for voter ID exists in the black community as in the white community. It's about 75-80% of blacks, 75-80% of whites support voter ID. But they're basically saying that black people can't get identification.
Just because corruption and rigging is illegal doesn't mean it can't happen. Like, comment, and subscribe for more.